Hi, welcome back. We're going to be looking at Chapter 2, which is learning the basics of CSS. We're going to take a step back before we start coding to really talk about how the code works and the syntax. We'll really get granular, but really I want to talk about the most important thing about CSS is the hierarchy. It doesn't sound like it has it, but it really does. And this is really a critical piece to understand about CSS, is how the code actually works, how we're going to implement it, and actually how we're going to look at the hierarchy and the details. First, we're going to talk about the code itself and the different tags methods and how the different the hierarchy structure works. We're then going to talk about implementing CSS into your file, and then we'll actually talk about how we add it into your project. Hopefully, if we do this right, we're going to do really, really clean. It's going to be a lot of fun to go through, and we're going to learn a lot right now. So the first thing, really important piece of it, is the hierarchy. CSS is based on 3 different levels. The first level, and I'll actually write them in the notes so that we can read along together, is what we refer to as global tags. The second one is what we're going to refer to as IDs, and the third one is what we're going to refer to as classes. Going through the hierarchy, we really need to understand that CSS is affecting your HTML code. Things that you reference in HTML are going to reference CSS. And there's 3 ways that the code responds to this. The first one is a global tag. And a global tag is something as simple as we can actually tell CSS to change the styling of the body tag in HTML. We can tell CSS to change the paragraph tag or to change the bold tag. And why I refer to as a global change is when you make reference to one of these HTML tags, it will affect the styling of every time you use it. Part of one of the reasons why it's called CSS is it's referred to as cascading style sheets, meaning when you apply a style to one element, it'll actually cascade that onto the next element, onto the next element, and onto the next element. So when we apply something to the bold tag, the paragraph tag, the italics tag, the body tag, the HTML tag, it affects everything that gets inside of it. And really that's critical for us to think about how we lay our styles. The next tag that's really critical is an ID. An ID really is about creating, I would refer to as a category or a section. Really the ID can be used once, where the global tag can be used once. You really only want to use it once because once you use it on the body, it affects everything in the body tag. Once you use paragraph, it affects everything in the paragraph. But what if we wanted to create 2 unique paragraphs, 2 unique sections, 2 unique areas? Let's say a perfect example is a header and a footer and a content area. This is where we would use an ID. An ID is used only once. It's only not repeated, and really the goal of an ID is to integrate layout issues there. Background colors, frame colors, anything what you would actually look at as a section is the critical portion. I refer to it as paragraph styles versus character styles. And really what we want to look at is how can we implement a lot of the visual pieces that we'll have in an HTML page into an ID. The third tag is a class, and you heard me refer to these as a character style. This is really where I want to implement things that are very granular and repeatable. So things like bold or color. Let's say I was going to create a perfect example is our style guide. We want to create headers and header text and footer text, and we want to create bold text, and we want to create subtitles. A lot of these would be classes. Things like font size, font color, font underlining. Anything that really is about the characterization and of something that could be repeatable. A lot of times we'll do it for spacing. And really the goal of this is starting with the global tags. What are the styles that I'm actually going to implement across the entire website in CSS? And I would put those in a body tag, or I would put those in an HTML tag. A perfect example is I want to change the entire background color of the page. I want to say the page is white. So I would go to the body tag and I would make a reference to that code and make the entire background white. Let's say I wanted to make the background of the header or the footer a different color. Then I would actually reference that as an ID. Again, IDs are one unique place. You do not want to repeat them over and over again. And the reason you don't is a lot of the browsers will actually catch these and catch mistakes for you. The desktop browser is really forgiving. A lot of the times it'll catch your little mistakes, but the big ones like using IDs, it might throw back an error. And the third one are the classes. Really the goal of this again is individual paragraphs, individual styles that you want to make very unique, but you want to repeat. This is really where our style guide really starts cooking with gas. Really the power of it is I want to create a style guide, and if I do my job right, I talk about scalability and editability, is if I go into the CSS style guide and do a change there, it'll affect that entire website. So really is the power of CSS is being able to change and edit and add and remove without having to change the code. A lot of times we'll work on projects that allow me to actually have the same website and maybe do different flavors on it by loading in different CSS, change colors, change logos. So really is where the power of it. And really the important thing is that the fact that we look at the hierarchy. One of the things is when we first get artwork, one of the things that I'll do is I'll sit down with a piece of artwork and put a marker around everything and say, this is going to be a div. This is going to be another div. This is going to be another div. I grab another marker and I'll color code things to say this is going to be a class. It sounds silly, but it's a really good way of referencing it. As you work through this, you're going to realize that there's different techniques. And really it's that organizational process. How do things work? How are they going to work for you? A lot of things in CSS you might be able to do in multiple ways in terms of spacing and padding and font size. And really it's about how it's going to work well for you. So let's move on to setting up a CSS in your HTML and how we're going to put that process in place.